to our webinar today on using Zoom and Canvas for online teaching and learning. My name is Avi. I'm the manager of the customer success team here at Instructure in APAC. I'd like to welcome everyone who's joining us today from the various places around the world where you're all isolating. Hope that we can all see each other soon. And to any of those people who are joining us on the recording. We will be recording today's session and we'll post the recording on the event website about 48 hours after we've finished. All right, so I'm very excited to welcome our panelists today. Just give me 1 second. All right, we have Ruth Weeks, the Educational Design Manager from the University of Sydney and one of our fabulous Canvas customers. We also have Sheena Sakdalan, who's an engineer from solutions engineer from Zoom and one of our partners, and of course our very own Greg Feller. Today's webinar should really be useful for anyone on the call who's currently using Zoom or Canvas in a teaching way, or for anyone who's interested in how you can use either of the two tools for your teaching needs. So we'll start off today with how the University of Sydney are using Zoom and Canvas together. We'll jump into a brief overview of Canvas from Greg, and then Sheena will take us through a brief overview of Zoom, and then talk a little bit about how Canvas and Zoom integrate together. And then we'll gather some insights from Ruth as to how the University of Sydney have been using the two tools. We'll follow up with a Q&A once all the presentations have been finished. And so before we kick off, you'll see a Q&A button on your screen. So please pop any questions that you have into the Q&A, and we'll endeavour to answer those throughout the presentation. During the Q&A at the end of the presentation section, we will look to answer any more questions that we have there, and hope that we can cover them all. All right, well, without any further ado, I'll hand over to Ruth.
Good afternoon, everybody. Great to see so many people joining. I can't see you, sorry, but very, very good to have so many people online. I'm going to start with a bit of brief context about the University of Sydney. So we're a large university in, Sydney, and we've got about 73,000 students. We have around 6,000 units of study. Those are our programs, our courses, about 6,000 staff, and we are a university with a very strong research focus and culture. So pre-COVID-19, we were pretty much a university that was mainly face-to-face and used some blended learning as well. In 2017, we moved to Canvas as our learning management system. So in 2017, we did quite a lot of work with colleagues around the university, a lot of professional development. So we were working towards uplifting our blended approach to learning then. On the next slide, I think I've got some information about what we were doing last year compared to this year, which you can see just how much our Canvas work has increased since COVID-19. So as you can see, 28% increase in Canvas sessions. We've had a huge jump of page views. So clearly students are spending a lot more time using Canvas at this time. So I think pre-COVID, we were doing a fair bit of blended learning with students engaging a lot online, but we also do have those traditional lectures that were being delivered in lecture theatres. Now, on the next slide, you'll see Zoom meetings. As you can see on this slide, it's absolutely amazing, an absolute exponential jump in the number of Zoom sessions that we've had compared to last year. And I was actually looking at the stats for April, and we're already up to, I think, about 160,000 sessions in April. So clearly we've had a huge, huge increase in those Zoom meetings. Now, it's impossible to know exactly how many of those are teaching, but I think we've worked out that about 25% of those are student to student, so students using Zoom to engage and communicate with each other. And the rest, the 75% of that huge number, are for teaching within Canvas. So it's clearly really interesting that I think it was probably around about the 23rd of March when we went into lockdown, we basically had a weekend where the Vice-Chancellor said we're going fully online, and all our colleagues across the whole university had to suddenly learn to teach online using Zoom and Canvas. And it's been a pretty incredible effort, and I think we've had an awful lot of success. And a bit later, I'll take you through some of the ways that we've been using Canvas and Zoom together to facilitate that change in our teaching. But now I'll pass on to, I think, Greg.
Thanks, Ruth. Yep, that's on to me now. So we just wanted to give people who may not have a context of Canvas a very, very brief introduction into the platform. So we've just got a couple of slides, and then we'll look at the platform very, very briefly from a student perspective, and then hand over to Sheena to show us through Zoom. So really what we have in front of us here, that Canvas makes teaching and learning easier for everyone. We can talk about this in a number of ways, but in recent times, we've been really proud as to being able to support institutions such as University of Sydney transition across to fully online teaching in this online context. So there's a number of ways that we can support your institutions, but it starts from really just being an easy platform to adopt. But also we work across a number of sectors: higher ed, K-12, vocational education. And the reason that Canvas is so easy to adopt, I'll be on to the next slide, is around how we can integrate with external tools. So today we're showing you our really brilliant integration with Zoom. But if Canvas isn't going to meet your needs in terms of potentially certain amount of student interaction, if you would like to bring in additional video tools, or if you would like to bring in integrations into Office 365 or into your Google ecosystem, very easy to do within our platform. So if I just share my screen now and run you through what Canvas looks like from a student perspective, first thing to highlight from my screen here is that we're looking at this from a student perspective, and within Canvas, students are really easily able to navigate through the platform. Some recent improvements that we've made to the platform actually help the students find their way around the platform automatically. So we have built in user tours into the platform, but also directly from a user's dashboard, the first screen they see when they log in, they can see what's coming up across all of their courses, any calendar events such as Zoom meetings which are coming up, any assessment feedback that the students obtained. And if we actually jump into a Canvas course, really easy to navigate, and also there's the flexibility to gear this towards the learners that you are targeting. If you're targeting younger learners in the K-12 context, we can really pare back what the student will see. If we're in the higher ed context, we can make the navigation a little more complex and a little more relevant to how they're studying. Within Canvas, we can really easily incorporate text, files, audio and video, and make it really interactive. We can engage the students through things like asynchronous discussions, or we can use a really synchronous tool like we're using here today and have Zoom collaborations within the platform as well. This particular resource that I'm looking at here is a combination of text. We've also uploaded some PDF files into this course so that the student can preview directly within their browser. But anytime that we want to work with video, Canvas makes that very easy, whether it's integrating with Zoom or whether you want to create your own content or link across to YouTube. In this case, we're showing an example of our video platform, and we've actually enabled commenting all through this video. So if we want to encourage our students to work outside of a synchronous tool like Zoom, Canvas can also support using video software as well. Looking at video, or keeping the conversation geared around video, we can also assess students while they're watching video. So in this video, rather than having students comment while they're watching that video playback, we can actually pop questions up on the screen. As a teacher, we can get feedback on how the students are going. And we can also grade the students using video as well if we would like. But Canvas has a number of different tools built in to increase student collaboration. It doesn't have to be video based. In this particular example, we're just asking students to introduce themselves, and it's using a discussion forum. So this is a tool that students can use socially. We can use this as a Q&A style forum, or this can also be a graded tool. So there's a lot of flexibility in Canvas to teach students with content, to engage them through collaborative tools such as discussions or working with collaborative documents. And we can also work one-on-one with students using tools like Zoom, or have large virtual classrooms as well. So Avi, that's really all I wanted to show, and I'm going to hand over to Sheena.
Thanks, Greg. Hi, everyone. Again, good afternoon, good morning, and maybe good evening to some of you, wherever you may be in this world. Thank you again for joining this webinar. And again, my name is Sheena. I'm from Zoom, Solutions Engineer from Zoom, covering the APAC region. I understand some of you might already be familiar with Zoom, some may not be familiar with Zoom. So in this discussion, in the next 10 minutes, I actually want to show or share two things. So the first off is just what Zoom is, and specific to Canvas, what can actually we do from Zoom's perspective. How are we using Zoom in the education sector and the training sector? And the next one is I would want to walk you through our Canvas LMS, where we have actually integrated Zoom in there as well, just to share with you briefly how we schedule meetings, how we are going to start meetings or classes for your students. So over here, you'll see what we call the Zoom product wheel. And specific to Canvas integration, what we're really looking into is the meetings platform. You may already be familiar with this. As I can see, you're joining from Zoom, so you do have the Zoom application. And as you may already know, you can have the Zoom application in your desktop, in your PC, or even in mobile devices. As long as you have an internet connection, and as easy as just knowing the meeting ID, you'll be able to join the meetings. And we're keeping that same easiness, same frictionless experience when we integrate to Zoom as well, or when we integrate to Canvas as well. And there, as you can see in here, there are other more products in our platform, but specific to Canvas, it's really the meetings platform, the meeting solution that we are looking into. Over to the next slide, Avi. Earlier on, Ruth has actually shared that specific to University of Sydney, they're using it 75% for student to teacher learning or student to teacher interaction. But she also mentioned that 25% of that is probably geared towards student to student collaboration. And that's actually one thing that I would want to point out where we can use Zoom in the education sector. It's not just for professors or for teachers conducting online classes to their students, but at the same time, we also have, or your students would also have projects, thesis that they probably have to work through. And once they have a license, they won't be capped with that 40 minutes. They can still be able to do student collaboration, do group works virtually, even in this situation. Other thing I would want to highlight is I understand not everyone might be coming from the education sector. So you can also definitely use Zoom for training purposes. Say you're a business or you're a corporation and you're looking to training your staff, especially for new hire purposes, can do a Canvas and Zoom integration and use these tools to be able to conduct new hire sessions. Over to the next slide of me. The other thing I would want to highlight in here is you can see that the key functions that you will see in Zoom is something that's also very important to trainings. So of course, we're currently in a video webinar, a Zoom webinar session, but similar to a Zoom meeting session, you can also share content and be able to collaborate in here. If you see at the top left portion of your PC right now, the Zoom application is also recording. So from an education perspective, especially in these times right now, if student missed a specific class or they're going into examination, you can record a session and the students can still review the classes that they have in case they want to go back to a specific part of the recording or specific part of the class. Over to the next slide of me. And this is how, in brief, the Canvas and the Zoom integration looks like. But I guess to better see the integration, it's really good to show how it works in real life, as they say. So let me just share my screen. And it should be loading in your side if it hasn't loaded yet. But over here, you'll see it's quite familiar with you now, as Greg has already shared the Canvas platform earlier. So you can see it's pretty neat. And once we do a Zoom integration, you'll be able to do the Zoom application in the specific course. So over here, there are a couple of tabs. We'll run through it very quickly. But for a specific course, you can see in here that there's already some pre-populated meetings or pre-populated classes. There are two types of meetings that you can see in here. One that's just a single session. And for many of the courses, as you can see here, for a class named math class, could be recurring sessions. So when you start a meeting, you just easily click this button and then it will cross-launch to the Zoom application. Now, how do we schedule a meeting actually? So you can just easily type a topic. In this case, maybe let's say Zoom Canvas session or lesson. You can easily set the timing for that, the duration as well, and the time zone, specifying specific time zones. One thing I would want to highlight, because now security is of key concern, we really suggest that in any session that you would have, especially for your classes, you require a meeting password. So you can set a meeting password over here as a teacher or the professor of a certain class. You can also enable a meeting room or a waiting room functionality, meaning before the students actually are able to join your class, you're able to check their names. And then if you can't confirm that this really is your student, you would admit them. If it's not your student, you can deny them from access into the specific class that you have. And you can also enable only authenticated users to join. This means that for me to be able to join a Zoom class that you are conducting, I have to be logged into the Zoom application. And with this, what we're doing is we're actually capturing their email address and their name as well. And that way we're able to verify and actually use this for reporting purposes as well. Just cancel that. Just refresh this page. I can also go to the previous meetings that I have. So over here, if I've had past classes, I've conducted classes previously, I can also see those classes. And the good feature that you have in here is you'll also be able to see the reports tab. So let's say you conducted a class, as you can see in here, there's only a couple of joiners or participants, students in this class, but you will be able to see their name, their email address, and even their join time and leave time as well. So you can, if you're using it for attendance purposes, you can also export this as a CSV file. And very quickly, the other important feature that you would have with the Zoom and the Canvas integration is that you're able to also publish the recordings for the students to be able to view it. So what you're seeing in here is a really neat integration between Zoom and Canvas, wherein you won't have to log into a separate Zoom login just to be able to schedule meetings and just to be able to access reports and just to be able cloud recordings. Within this one specific platform, just the Canvas platform, you're able to create meetings, you're able to access your previous meetings, and you're also able to access your cloud recording. So for the students, they can also just easily click on the recordings that you have. And once they click this, they will now be able to see or load the recording that you have for that specific session. So there's also a transcription feature over here from Zoom. So again, just within the Canvas application, you don't have to toggle or log into different tabs. Within Canvas, you're able to do all these functionalities. So that's it. Over to you, Avi.
Hi, and it's back to me, Ruth. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about how we've been using Canvas and Zoom at Sydney. And thanks, Greg and Sheena, because a lot of those tools we use quite a lot at Sydney. So as I mentioned before, before COVID-19 happened, we were using Zoom at Sydney, but it was mainly, I think, from my perspective anyway, for meetings with colleagues. I don't know that we were using it for teaching that much, or not that we were aware of. But once COVID hit, as I said, the curve went crazy, an exponential rise. So I think what happened quite naturally when we had to suddenly pivot to fully online teaching was that all our colleagues, all our teaching academics across the university had to really quickly learn to teach online using Zoom. And so the natural thing to do was to basically replicate lectures by putting them onto Zoom, which worked incredibly well, and we had a lot of success doing that. Since those initial weeks at the beginning of March, I think I can't even remember how many weeks we're on now, 6 weeks later, I think we've all started thinking a bit more about how we could improve the students' experience through doing a more asynchronous approach to lectures. So I think what's going on now that's really interesting is that colleagues are using some of the tools within Canvas, such as Studio, to record lectures first and put them into Canvas and use the collaborative synchronous sessions to engage in more sort of active learning and engagement activities, almost like, you know, flipping your lectures in a fully online way. So I know a lot of colleagues at the university are using other tools within Canvas. So we're using tools such as Padlet. I don't know if you're aware of Padlet, but it's worth a Google. It's a really great little tool for creating content. So students can go in and create content together, and it's live. We've been using Mentimeter, which is a polling tool, a bit like Socrative, Google Docs. I think there was a question in the Q&A section about how to sort of get that very experiential learning fully online, and it's really hard to do that. But I have colleagues who are teaching chemistry who are using iPads hooked up to Zoom so that they can annotate chemical equations on the iPads, and the students can engage with that in the class and do worksheets at the same time. The other thing we've been trying to do a lot is using discussion boards in Canvas and Zoom for group work. So I think in terms of getting students engaging, the tools in Zoom where you can assign breakout rooms, so put students into smaller groups, are really good for getting that kind of engagement going. We've had all those questions where, what do you set up the breakout rooms? Do you put the students in, or do you let the students choose? Do you reshuffle the groups every time? How big should they be? I think for really good group work, it's great to have small groups of like 3 or 4. And anecdotally, we've had feedback from some students who are studying languages that they're actually finding the online group work better than the face-to-face work, because they're having more time to actually practice in small groups speaking, and perhaps not the stress of being in a very large group and performing in front of a lot of people. So there's definitely great positives of those breakout rooms and doing things asynchronously. I think Greg mentioned the use of Studio, which is the video recording tool in Canvas. We've also been encouraging colleagues to use that for uploading their videos, because you can add closed captions really easily, which is great for students who need closed captions. It's great for people who aren't native speakers of English. We've also had a lot of professional development looking at how to communicate and how to scaffold work online, because it is a very different environment than face-to-face, and it can sometimes be a quite isolating experience, and you can kind of get lost in what you're meant to do. So we've been encouraging colleagues to be very explicit about how they want people to communicate in their Zoom questions, whether they're using the hands up tool, butting in, what are the rules of engagement, and scaffolding that really clearly. There's also the chat, as many of you are using here, and I guess that's a really great way of getting students to interact too. But it's, if you're like me and a bit old, the idea of multitasking and trying to chat while listening can get a bit high on the cognitive load in terms of people's attention spans as well. And finally, I just wanted to mention that some colleagues in our clinical disciplines, medicine, health sciences, pharmacy, have been using Zooms now for doing OSCEs, which are objective structural clinical exams. So basically it's where a clinician and examiner will observe a student carrying out a clinical assessment, history taking, something like that. So it's obviously a pretty stressful thing to do in a not fully online asynchronous environment, but we've had a lot of success using the waiting rooms where students are queued and using a breakout room for each examiner to do that particular piece of work. So I guess, yeah, Sydney, we've had, it's been a bit of a baptism by fire. I think it probably has been for many colleagues. I'm sure many of you and who are involved in all types of levels of teaching, primary, tertiary, secondary, have found it's been a massive, massive learning curve for everybody. And it isn't, you know, it's a hard thing to do, to suddenly pivot to a completely new way of teaching and a completely new way of learning online. But I think that the overall thing is that good teaching is good teaching, no matter, you know, how it occurs and where it occurs. And as long as we keep the students in our minds and we think clearly about communication and scaffolding and just trying to engage people and trying to get those kind of relationships happening, which are quite hard in an online environment, then I think, you know, we're doing as best as we can, and we're doing a very good thing. So yeah, I think I've probably talked enough, but if anybody has any questions later on, please do feel free to ask.
Oh, thank you so much, Ruth, and thank you to all the panelists. I'd like to welcome back our panelists now, because we are at the Q&A section of the webinar. And so, yeah, thank you so much to Ruth, Greg, and Sheena for taking us through your different areas. There's been lots of questions in the Q&A as we've been talking, and we've answered some of those, but we'll ask a couple more now. If we don't manage to answer your question during the session or in this live Q&A, then please follow the QR code on your screen and request more information, and we'll get back to you to answer those after the event. All right, let's have a look at what the questions we have currently. Okay, so the first question we've got here is, how is it possible to take exams when using Zoom and Canvas together?
Okay, so I might answer that briefly from the perspective of Sydney. We are not encouraging exams proctored by Zoom because of the many issues that Zoom isn't actually designed to be a proctoring solution. We're actually using another company to do online proctoring. However, as I mentioned before, we have been using it for those OSCE type, the practical observed examinations and Viva type examinations, but I can't comment on using Zoom and Canvas for other types of exams because we're not actually doing that at the moment. Would anybody else like to chime in on that?
For my end, I think it really yeah, go ahead, Greg.
I was just going to say, I think from what we're seeing as well, Ruth, that's similar to how a lot of organizations are managing exams. It's Zoom probably is more of a collaborative tool than an individual assessment tool. So potentially there could be, you know, using breakout rooms to facilitate exam monitoring. But as Ruth mentioned, there is specific software, specific companies that do proctoring and those sort of services as well.
I would just echo the same. From our end, Zoom is really mostly used for conducting classes, or as I mentioned, like student-to-student collaboration. It's a bit difficult to use it for proctoring, especially in the conditions right now wherein the students are just in their rooms and we can't really see what they're doing or what their environment is.
No worries, thank you.
Yeah, very true. If you're looking to proctor somebody and you actually want to know what they're doing on their screen, you can't actually see that, so it's probably not the most strong integrity-wise to do that.
Okay, we have another question here that's really looking at how do we shift into more practical or hands-on educational techniques using Canvas and Zoom together. I think that's a very pertinent question, especially during this current period.
Yeah, I think it's incredibly hard to get that experiential learning going on in a fully online environment. So I know that in the pharmacology and anatomy courses, some colleagues have been using iPads to actually set up Zoom sessions for students, so students can see what's going on in the lab and actually look at what they're doing. And as I said, a colleague in chemistry who's using iPads to annotate and do live worksheet work. So I think it's possible, but it's that thing where you can watch something doing it yourself, then it's probably not as rich and as useful as being there in real life, but it's certainly possible using cameras to do that.
Just looking through the questions, and Avi, Sheena, there's one that's come up a couple of times around monitoring breakout rooms in bulk. Sheena, do you want to comment on the ability to kind of listen in or monitor breakout rooms, whether that's, you know, individual breakout room or whether that can be done centrally?
Yeah, so for breakout rooms, maybe I'll start off first with how in Canvas it's actually done. Currently, you can't create the breakout rooms or pre-assigned breakout rooms in Canvas. That's something that I guess Canvas and Zoom is working on to enable the APIs, more from into the weeds, but just FYI. And then from managing a breakout room, the current behavior or how it's really done is that typically for any class, there's one professor or one teacher moderating the class. What we're seeing is in cases wherein they need multiple moderators or multiple professors or teachers to handle different breakout sessions, the students or the professors, when they schedule the meeting, when they create the meeting, they can add alternative hosts, or within the meeting itself, you can actually elect these professors, these other moderators as co-hosts as well. So those people can also jump in and jump out of the breakout rooms if need be.
Thanks, Sheena.
Thanks, Sheena.
Just looking through the questions, we've got 46 open questions here, so it's hard to kind of monitor which ones we can answer. We're definitely not going to be able to cover them all today. Not sure if anyone can pick out a question here to answer.
I guess there's a question from Alden, and he's asking if Zoom is already an added feature of Canvas, or is it an application that we need to add on? There were some questions on this earlier as well. We understand that this webinar is quite limited, and we wanted to share with you like the key features and functionalities, but for you to be able to do a Canvas and Zoom integration, there's some work to be done from the back end. Complete documentation is definitely out there, and if Ruth can also share her experience, how easily or how difficult, if it was the case, it can be done, but we've deployed it in a number of our customers or a number of educational institutions in APAC as well, and so far they're loving the integration.
So I'm not really so much involved with the tech. Sorry, there's this train going past outside, so it's a bit noisy. Sorry. I've also got a cat guest in the background meowing. We have had no problems with our Zoom integration at all. I believe the only problems that we've had in terms of the functioning of it was at the beginning when we were using it heavily. Clearly the whole of the world was too, and the load balance was just incredibly high. So we had a few very shaky weeks, but I think it's working and up and running now. I think there were a few questions in the question and answer about the safety of Zoom and with the Zoom in the media. We now have extra security so that only students who've got a University of Sydney email or staff can use it. So we haven't experienced any of those since we instigated that. We also, I don't know if anyone's interested in the privacy sort of aspect of it, but we also have put a footer into our Canvas site telling students that they may be recorded, and if that's an issue for them in terms of their privacy, then they need to alert their teacher and get permission to turn their camera off, because clearly student privacy is important too. Because I mean, usually we have our students in a classroom and they choose to come, but now we're entering their spaces, you know, so it's a strange period of time for everybody, I think.
And so we've got a couple of questions here just around the kind of licensing aspect of the two tools, Canvas and Zoom. So it's probably just worth being clear that, you know, Canvas and Zoom are separate companies. So there's licensing agreements that you'd need to look into for both of the tools. There are trials available of Canvas, and the integration itself, Sheena, correct me if I'm wrong, but there is no cost to actually integrate the two products together, but there is a licensing cost for the two products separately.
Yeah, that's right. From Zoom's end, I'm not sure with the licensing structure with Canvas, but from Zoom's end, I guess most of the attendees in here are from the education sector. So as long as you get the education license, you're pretty much set up to do the integration again at no cost.
There's lots of questions around quizzing. And so obviously using Zoom, there's limited quizzing functionality, but there is a lot of quizzing functionality within Canvas. So I think for the people that have been asking about quizzes in Zoom, it's really just the polling feature at the moment.
So we encourage colleagues to use Zoom for collaboration, and I mean, ideally, you might have a pre-recorded lecture with some content that you put into your, into Canvas, where students engage with that, and then there's a quiz afterwards for formative feedback. The quizzing tools in Canvas are fine, pretty simple to use, and then the Zoom part would be for troubleshooting anything that comes up from the formative quiz, or delving deeper into some aspect of questions that have come up, clarifying common misunderstanding, something like that. So I think you can use the suite of tools that exist in a way that suits whatever your teaching context is.
Thanks, Ruth. Sheena, a couple of questions around attendance via Zoom. So I know that you quickly ran through that ability to monitor attendance via the Canvas integration. Do you want to talk any more about that?
Yep, so sure. For the Zoom integration and the Canvas integration, what we're doing is, as I shared with you earlier, there's a tab for previous meetings wherein you can actually get the attendance report. So just FYI, of course, if a meeting hasn't started yet, you won't be able to pull the report. So after the meeting ends, the meeting or the specific class will be recorded in the previous meetings tab, and then you will be able to pull the reports from there. Now, since I think I've mentioned this earlier, but what we're really doing in here is making Zoom quite transparent, and we're just showing it on Canvas. Of course, from Zoom side, you can also pull the reports, but I guess for most of the teachers and professors, they're really familiar with the Canvas platform, and that's why we're integrating the report functionalities within Canvas to make it easier for all the users.
And Ruth, there's a question in here which we probably can't provide a definitive answer, but really interested in your take. Can online learning be equally effective as face-to-face learning? So I know that you've commented a little bit about the affordances of a Zoom session, but have you got any other comments there?
Okay, so here's the thing. I am a student in a fully online course at a university, at Edinburgh University, and it's I think it's fantastic. It's an amazing course. I think if you design a digital course to be fully online and a lot of thought goes into it, it can be just as effective. But the caveat to that is that I'm a postgrad, I'm highly motivated. It's a subject that doesn't have, it's digital education, so it's digital, it's perfect for being online. It doesn't have an experiential part of it. Most of my cohort are highly motivated. We're mainly all either academics or professionals in the field. So I think it can definitely work. And I think online learning can be just as engaging. I think the key to this is not trying to replicate the face-to-face through the online. It's understanding that they're different environments. They have different strengths. They have different affordances. So I think trying to replace a very engaging live activity that happens face-to-face, that's not the way to go. We have to do it at the moment because we're all in isolation. But I guess my hope for the future, out of all of this, what we've learned is that we take the great bits of the digital and we use them in tandem with the things that we absolutely need to do face to face, especially with undergraduates, large classes. it's the social, it's the relationship building, it's the experience, it's the coming for the really great face-to-face teaching that we need to keep. But I think we can certainly make online a good part of that experience too. So I don't think it's one or t'other. It can be, but it's good teaching is good teaching wherever you do it. You just have to be careful of what you're trying to do.
Thanks, Ruth. Something in here maybe for Sheena, it's around the speed of an internet connection required for Canvas and Zoom to work together. And this is specifically around a question where the users don't necessarily have great internet connectivity.
Yeah, so for that, I believe for the Canvas portion, it's not real-time data. So the bandwidth requirements is probably not as stringent as you would require for Zoom or for other collaboration platforms, which require audio and video. From Zoom's end, we can definitely share the published documents from our end, from our support pages, but it's ranging between 800 kbps to maybe about 1.2 mbps. Then with that kind of bandwidth, you would have a good connection. Now we understand for some locations, this might not be possible, and that's why we're also offering PSTN access. But this is not where we lead, because as you can see, when you're using the Zoom application connected via the internet, right, you're able to see the video of the participants, your teachers and the other students. At the same time, you're also able to see the content that's being shared, which you might not get if you're just connected via audio, like via your mobile phone or via your landline phone.
Sorry, I'm just going to interrupt because there was a question in the Q&A that I clicked on the wrong thing. It was a question about professional development for staff using Zoom, and do we make people attend professional development before they use Zoom or Canvas? We don't make people do any professional development, but we do offer a lot of professional development. And just after COVID hit and we realized that we had to go fully online, many of my colleagues worked endless hours all weekend getting together resources. So we have, at Sydney, we have Canvas sites dedicated to teaching in the time of COVID. And we offer a lot of workshops via Zoom on teaching in Zoom, and workshops on using all of the suite of digital tools that we use, and we offer them regularly, but they're not mandatory. We also have a professional learning framework that we offer to any colleagues that includes the pedagogy and the teaching around blended face-to-face and online teaching. So I think it's a really good idea if you're going to, if you're using these tools, to offer some PD, but we don't make it mandatory.
Thanks, Ruth. We are at the end of our time today, so I'd love to just really thank our three panelists, Ruth, Sheena and Greg, for the time that they've given us today. There's still lots of questions in the chat and they're coming in thick and fast, so we will endeavour to answer all of those as we keep going. Just finishing up here, but also, like I've said earlier, please feel free to follow the QR code, and we will get back to you with more information with any of those questions. So thank you so much for everyone for joining us today, and thank you again to our three panelists for a fantastic discussion.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
The recording has stopped.